Welcome to Fun Facts Daily, your source for just the good stuff. Monday through Friday, we're bringing fun facts and news you can use, all carefully curated to uplift and inform. So give yourself a break, relax, and learn something awesome in just a few minutes every day. Hi everyone, I'm Kyle.
I'm Atticus.
And I'm Philly.
While every episode of Fun Facts Daily is clean and appropriate for listeners of all ages, on the first Friday of every month, I like to make a special Family Fun Friday with my kids co-hosting as we explore a topic they love and hopefully you and your family will too.
Today, we'll be learning about some of the wildest and most audacious criminals in history. But before we get into the facts, let's warm up our brains with a little challenge to see if you can tell fact from fiction.
Consider this.
The famous movie Catch Me If You Can is based on a teenager who impersonated an airline pilot, a doctor, and a lawyer, flying around the world for free and cashing in millions in fake checks, all before he was 21 years old.
It's an amazing story, but could that really be true? Could one teenager really have pulled off such an amazing string of cons?
We'll find out at the end of the episode.
Now for your word of the day.
Today's word is grifter. Grifter. Grifter.
A grifter is a person who engages in petty or small-scale swindling. The word itself is pure American slang, first appearing in the early 20th century. It's believed to be a variation of the word graft, which in this context means acquiring money or advantage through dishonest or shady means. The term often brings to mind the image of a traveling salesperson with questionable wares or charismatic carnival workers running rigged games. Unlike a typical thief who uses force or stealth, a grifter's primary tools are their charm, confidence, and a deep understanding of human psychology. They don't break down doors, they talk their way through them. A grifter builds trust and exploits a person's emotions like greed, hope, or even kindness to manipulate them into willingly handing over their money. The criminals we're talking about today are masters of the grift, elevating small-scale swindling to a true form of art. Time for your daily high five, our top 5 fun facts about audacious grifters.
Number 1. A lot of art forgers have fooled collectors and even critics. But Han van Meegeren was so good, after he admitted to his crimes, he had to prove it by producing a forgery under court supervision.
Han van Meegeren was a skilled but overlooked Dutch painter who found his true calling in fraud. He became one of the most successful art forgers in history by perfecting the style of the 17th century Dutch master Johannes Vermeer. Han van Meegeren was meticulous, using old canvases, mixing his own period-accurate pigments, and even baking his paintings to simulate centuries of aging. His forgeries were so convincing that they fooled the world's leading art historians and experts, who authenticated and celebrated his works as newly discovered Vermeer masterpieces. His elaborate con came to a head after World War II when a previously unknown Vermeer was discovered in the personal collection of a high-ranking Nazi official, Hermann Göring. Authorities traced the sale back to van Meegeren and arrested him for treason for selling a Dutch cultural treasure to the enemy. To save his own life, van Meegeren made a shocking confession. It wasn't treason because the painting was a fake he created himself. When the stunned experts refused to believe him, the court had him paint one last, quote, Vermeer under police guard. The result was so brilliant it proved he was a forger, and he became a sort of folk hero to some for having duped the Nazis. And if you want to learn more about the unbelievable story of Han van Meegeren, check the links in the show notes. I did an episode of my other podcast, Who Arted, all about Han van Meegeren a while ago.
Number 2. A daring thief hijacked an airplane, received a $200,000 ransom, and then parachuted into a stormy night, never to be seen again.
On the day before Thanksgiving in 1971, a man in a business suit, calling himself Dan Cooper, later known to the media as D.B. Cooper, boarded a Boeing 727 flight from Portland to Seattle. He calmly passed a note to the flight attendant claiming he had a bomb in his briefcase. He demanded $200,000 in cash, which would be the equivalent of over $1.5 million in today's money, and 4 parachutes. The plane landed in Seattle, where his demands were met. Cooper then allowed the passengers to leave, but ordered the pilots to fly towards Mexico City. Somewhere over the dense, stormy wilderness of southern Washington, Cooper did the unthinkable. He opened the rear air stair of the plane, a unique feature of the 727, and jumped out into the freezing night with the ransom money. An extensive manhunt was launched, but no trace of Cooper or his parachute were ever found. To this day, the case remains the only unsolved air piracy in American history, and the identity and fate of D.B. Cooper remain one of the greatest mysteries of our time.
Number 3. Victor Lustig, the legendary conman who sold the Eiffel Tower for scrap, convinced several people that he had a special box that could duplicate money. He even conned the notorious gangster Al Capone.
Victor Lustig was a master of theatrical crimes, and his favorite was the, quote, Romanian money box. This was a small, custom-made box that Lustig claimed could perfectly duplicate any currency using a complex chemical process. He would demonstrate it by inserting a real $100 bill, turning some cranks, and then waiting. Because the, quote, process was supposedly very slow, it would take 6 hours for the duplicate bill to be ready. After the dramatic wait, he would open the box and produce 2 $100 bills, one of which he had hidden in a secret compartment beforehand. Lustig was so confident in his abilities, he sold this Romanian money box to several people, including a sheriff, which, really, of all people, he should have known better. But I think probably the most audacious crime was running a scam on the infamous Al Capone. He approached Capone and convinced him to invest $50,000 in the money box scheme. Lustig took the cash, told Capone he'd return in a couple months with double the amount, and then simply put the money in a safe deposit box. 2 months later, he returned to Capone, gave him the original $50,000 back, and apologized profusely, claiming the machine had failed. Capone was so impressed by what he thought was Lustig's honesty for returning the money, he gave him a $5,000 reward, which was exactly what Lustig had been after all along.
Number 4. 3 burglars stole some of the world's most famous gems by climbing in through an open window at the museum.
In 1964, a trio of thieves led by a charismatic surfer and jewel thief named Jack Murphy, better known as Murph the Surf, pulled off a brazen robbery at the American Museum of Natural History. Their targets were the priceless jewels in the J.P. Morgan Hall of Gems, including the Star of India, the world's largest sapphire, and the DeLong Star Ruby. The museum's security, though, was shockingly weak for an institution housing such treasures. The burglars noticed that the windows at the top of the museum were often left open for ventilation, so they simply climbed up the wall and then climbed through the open window using a rope and went to work. To their surprise, they found that the battery-powered alarms on the individual display cases were either dead or had been turned off. Using a glass cutter and duct tape, they quietly broke into the cases and walked out with a fortune in gems. They were caught 2 days later, though, not due to brilliant detective work, but because a hotel worker overheard them bragging about the heist.
And for our fifth and final fun fact, the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra's son was masterminded by a trio of hilariously inept amateur criminals.
In December of 1963, Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped from his hotel room in Lake Tahoe by 3 young men who were hoping to get rich quick. The mastermind, Barry Keenan, devised a plan that he thought was brilliant, demanding a $240,000 ransom. But the execution of the crime was a comedy of errors from start to finish. The kidnappers were so inexperienced that the victim was reportedly more annoyed than scared for much of the ordeal. The plan completely fell apart during the ransom negotiation. At one point, Frank Sinatra Sr. offered the kidnappers $1 million, but the bumbling Keenan stuck to his original demand, negotiating down on the ransom, not realizing he could have quadrupled his earnings. Later, while making a ransom call from a payphone, Keenan ran out of dimes. In a now famous twist, he had to ask Frank Sinatra Sr. himself for help, and Sinatra arranged to have the call charged to his own phone number. The whole caper ended when one of the kidnappers had a crisis of conscience. He confessed everything to his brother, and the brother immediately called the FBI. Now for some news you can use.
Many of the cons we talked about today relied on exploiting human trust and the lure of a fantastic opportunity. A great piece of advice to protect yourself from modern-day grifters is to remember the old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
That's right. Scammers, whether online or in person, often create a sense of urgency, pressuring you to act immediately before you have time to think. They might offer a prize you've, quote, won, a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity, or an urgent plea for help. The best defense is to pause and take a breath. Never make a major decision under pressure. If you get an unsolicited offer, do a bit of research. Look up the company online, check for reviews or scam reports, and talk it over with a friend or family member. A legitimate business or person will not pressure you for an instant decision. By simply taking a step back to think critically, you can spot the red flags and keep yourself safe from even the most convincing grifters.
At the start of the episode, we asked if the legendary story of Frank Abagnale Jr. as a teenage master imposter was fact or fiction.
This is a tricky one. It's a mix of both truth and fiction.
That's right. The truth is a whole lot smaller than the legend. And the story we know from the movie Catch Me If You Can is largely a fallacy. Frank Abagnale Jr. was a real person, and he was a convicted check forger in his youth. However, investigative journalists have uncovered public records showing that during the time he claimed to be posing as a doctor in Georgia and a lawyer in Louisiana, he was actually in prison. There are no records of him ever working for Pan Am as a pilot, serving as a doctor, or passing the bar exam. The timeline of his real-life crimes doesn't match up with the incredible adventures he describes. So, while he was indeed a criminal, perhaps his most successful and longest-running con was convincing the world of his own amazing life story. He built a lucrative career as a speaker and security consultant based on a narrative that appears to be his greatest forgery of all. So the myth of the master teenage imposter is, for the most part, just that, a myth.
I hoped you enjoyed learning about these audacious criminals with us today. Be sure to tune in every weekday for more fun facts.
Fun Facts Daily is an Airwave Media podcast. It was written, recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Kyle Wood. Thanks for sharing a part of your day with me. Be sure to follow Fun Facts Daily on your favorite podcast app so you can keep the good stuff coming your way every day. And if you like the show, please do me a favor and leave a kind rating, review, or just tell your friends about it.
Bye. Thanks for listening.